There is a reality many prefer to avoid, yet it must be delivered with compassion and seriousness. God's compassion has not been sealed shut, but it is not an open invitation without an ending. This is not because His care fades. He is the very definition of love, but because every divine window has a set season. Throughout Scripture, we see a God who waits, who restrains anger, who overflows with kindness. However, even divine patience reaches a point where a decision is required. You are standing in that exact hour. The reason these words have reached you is evidence that the entrance has not yet been shut. Grace has not gone silent. Compassion is still whispering your identity. Many confuse postponed consequences with permission, assuming that because correction hasn't arrived, surrender can be delayed. Yet heaven's quiet does not signal approval. It often reveals mercy, granting room to change direction. Noah continued proclaiming truth while access to safety remained available. The storm did not arrive instantly, but when it did, the opportunity ended abruptly. Those who ridiculed compassion learned too late that mercy has a rhythm, and once it ceases, only aftermath follows. Today, God is not issuing threats. He is extending an appeal. He is saying, return while opportunity remains. Choose me while access is still granted. This open passage symbolizes pardon that has not timed out, requests that can still be answered, purposes that can still be revived. It is the closing stretch of grace where heaven holds its breath, waiting to see if you will answer. God has already passed over periods of defiance, moments of moral shortcuts, and times you knew the right path, yet chose ease instead. Not due to ignorance, but because He longed for your return. Compassion has been positioned at your threshold longer than you recognize. Yet understand the seriousness of this hour. Mercy ignored eventually becomes mercy removed, not with rage, not with force, but with silence. One day, people realized the warning stopped, the interruptions ceased, the knocking ended. That is the most perilous state. Not when God confronts you, but when He allows you to move forward unchecked. If your spirit still senses conviction, if these words awaken unease, urgency, or even trembling, that is compassion communicating. That is God saying, I have not left. This is not reserved for later, for another season, or for a calmer chapter of life. This moment is now. God is not demanding flawlessness. He is seeking surrender. He is not asking for justifications, rehearsed apologies, or vows you've already broken. He is calling you toward surrender, toward alignment, toward action. Move in His direction while access still exists, because the same divine authority that creates an opening also determines when it ends. Hold on to this closing reality with seriousness. If your inner being feels pressed, stirred, or unsettled right now, it is because heaven is offering a final, compassionate nudge. Do not wait for separation to understand that this was your appointed hour. God has been communicating with you far longer than you realized, even when you failed to identify it as His presence. Not every alert arrives with thunder, fire, or signs blazing across the sky. Often, divine caution comes through a troubled mind that refuses rest, through a message that repeatedly crosses your path, through sudden barriers you did not expect, or through voices that spoke honesty you resisted. You labeled it coincidence, misfortune, or unwanted pressure, but heaven defined it as compassion in motion. Every disruption, every pause, every uneasy moment was God intervening before irreversible damage occurred. There were times when clarity pierced your conscience regarding a decision, a routine, or a direction you continued to follow. You knew it lacked alignment. Yet you persuaded yourself that change could be postponed. Still, God did not fall silent. He released alert after alert, not to humiliate you, but to shield you. He communicated through messages that seemed personally crafted, through losses meant to awaken rather than erase you, through delays designed to shift your course. Each signal was a rescue line, never a sentence. Yet when caution is dismissed again and again, the inner core begins to stiffen. What once carried weight becomes ordinary. What once caused trembling turns familiar. This is the hidden risk of postponement in the spirit. Awareness dulls. God's voice does not weaken, our responsiveness does. That is why this instant carries such gravity. These words are not merely another prompt. They are the closing appeal before quiet becomes the instructor. When urgency rises in God's tone, it is not due to diminished love, but because opportunity is narrowing. This final appeal is not designed to terrify you into compliance, but to awaken you to truth. There comes a moment when persuasion ends, and outcomes are permitted to speak on their own. Not because God desires your collapse, but because you declined to rise when His summons came. This is the invisible boundary many step over without awareness. They believe divine intervention will always arrive, that rescue will never fail, that outcomes will forever be postponed. Yet Scripture reveals moments when God declared completion, not through rage, but through righteousness. If an uncommon pressure is stirring within you now, it is because this appeal carries greater weight. This is not repetition, it is intensification. Heaven is saying, "You have recognized my voice before, but now a verdict is required." This is the final signal before the atmosphere shifts. The Spirit is not requesting half-hearted compliance or emotional acknowledgement. He is calling for a resolved choice that produces movement. Heaven has already spoken, only your reply remains. Every postponement of surrender extracts a price, even when that price remains unseen at first. You may continue forward without immediate disruption, because daily life rarely reveals consequences instantly. Yet in the unseen realm, there is no neutrality. When God speaks and hesitation follows, an internal realignment begins. Calm diminishes. Direction blurs. The joy that once surfaced effortlessly drifts out of reach. You question why prayer feels burdensome, why praise lacks depth, why drive has evaporated, often tracing it back to the instant God instructed progress and you chose pause. Deferred obedience slowly erodes what prompt obedience safeguards. Outwardly, you may remain active, composed, and present, yet inwardly, something has thinned. Opportunities intended to bloom in their appointed window fade silently. Connections that could have been restored grow increasingly tangled. Favor that once moved freely now feels constrained. Not because God shifted, but because alignment fractured. Obedience positions us beneath heaven's current. Delay places us just beyond it. The sorrow is that many attribute the loss to God, unaware that it followed their hesitation. God records not to accuse, but to uncover. Every disregarded directive is remembered, waiting for a moment of correction or renewal. This is why certain promises feel postponed while others appear forfeited. Not because God withdrew His word, but because timing was dismissed. The burden of delay is not only forfeiture, but accumulation. Shame, remorse, and uncertainty begin pressing against the soul. You replay moments of clarity, times when conviction was unmistakable, realizing the cost outweighed your expectations. Yet even within this sobering truth, compassion still murmurs. The final open passage holds power because it offers restoration, not merely pardon. What hesitation has taken, obedience can still reclaim if you respond now. God is not asking you to relive yesterday, but to grow wiser because of it. He is declaring, do not allow yesterday's hesitation to turn into today's ruin. This is the narrow interval where surrender repairs what postponement has weakened. Yet this passage demands movement, not merely desire. There is a clear divide between wanting change and choosing it. Desire feels sincere, but surrender carries weight. Desire says transformation will come eventually. Surrender says it begins immediately. Countless lives are filled with good intentions yet abandon purposes, because heaven does not respond to plans, it responds to steps. That is why this hour carries urgency. Delay compounds the cost. What once arrived as a gentle directive eventually becomes a severe lesson. In this moment, God is exposing the toll already paid, not to disgrace you, but to awaken you. You still possess the opportunity to prevent further loss. Obedience in the present can interrupt years of regret in the future. Access remains available, but it requires advancement, not hesitation. Every opening God places before you carries an unavoidable choice. Neutrality does not exist in moments like this. When God unlocks a door, He is not simply offering possibility. He is measuring alignment. To cross its threshold is to agree with His purpose, His timing, and His rule. To reject it is not merely to remain still, but to step onto an alternate course entirely. This is where many misinterpret divine correction, mistaking guidance for punishment, when in reality it is direction enforced after resistance. Destiny and discipline often stand opposite one another at the same entrance. One step forward leads into healing, expansion, and meaning. One step backward leads into restriction, delay, and refinement. God always prefers to guide gently, yet when surrender is resisted, pressure replaces invitation to produce what obedience would have released freely. Correction is not abandonment. It is God refusing to allow continued misalignment. Still, correction carries pain because it is preventable. When you move through God's open passage, alignment begins to unfold beyond your effort. Confusion gives way to peace, anxiety yields to direction, and provision meets surrender. Purpose does not eliminate hardship, but it infuses it with meaning. Struggle with clarity differs greatly from struggle without direction. God's doorway does not remove challenges, it assigns them purpose, allowing you to endure with hope rather than fear. But when the opening is ignored, God does not stop working. He changes methods. What could have been learned through surrender must now be learned through consequence. The wilderness does not signal absence, it often confirms instruction. Israel's promise was reachable in weeks, yet hesitation stretched it into decades, not because God altered His word, but because His voice was resisted. Discipline expands time, obedience accelerates it. Correction slows progress until understanding is formed. God does not correct to destroy, He corrects to restore. Yet restoration through correction is heavier than restoration through surrender, involving loss, discomfort, and the removal of misplaced dependencies. Stability is shaken, confidence is stripped, and familiar supports collapse. This is severe mercy, removing distractions to reclaim attention. How much lighter it would have been to simply walk forward when the entrance stood open. This moment matters because the opening before you has not yet closed. Purpose is still reachable without correction. Respond now, and you are being offered the chance to choose growth instead of restraint. Surrender instead of resistance, alignment instead of struggle. God is not forcing your choice, but He is clarifying the outcome. One step determines the season ahead. Heaven has already acted. Now your movement will decide whether what follows feels like fulfillment or fracture. What restrains most people from stepping forward is not disbelief, but the quiet alliance of fear, pride, and comfort. Fear murmurs that obedience will cost too much, that failure is certain, that readiness has not arrived. It enlarges uncertainty while shrinking God's faithfulness, convincing you that stillness feels safer than trust. Yet security without surrender slowly becomes confinement, and today's ease becomes tomorrow's cage. Pride operates more subtly but with equal damage, resisting surrender because surrender threatens control. It claims self-sufficiency or postpones change until conditions feel favorable, appearing reasonable while refusing to bow fully. Pride desires blessing without authority, standing at open doors, analyzing, justifying, and delaying while purpose waits beyond reach. Comfort is the most deceptive obstacle of all. It does not shout, it soothes, persuading you that partial surrender is enough and growth can occur without disruption. Yet Scripture shows that every major step of faith required leaving familiarity behind. Comfort delays obedience by making stagnation feel acceptable, even while destiny stands one step away. These three influences, fear, ego, and ease, combine quietly to freeze movement while moments slip away. Darkness does not always need to ruin a person. Postponement alone can achieve the same result. The enemy understands that delayed surrender eventually produces the fruit of refusal, only at a slower pace. That is why this hour carries such weight. God is uncovering the true reason you have remained still. Not to accuse you, but to challenge what has been governing you. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the resolve to advance through it. Humility is not frailty, it is power placed under authority. Discomfort is not retribution, it is often the entryway to renewal. God is inviting you to move like Peter, stepping onto uncertain ground sustained only by divine command. The wonder did not occur while he remained secure in the vessel. It manifested the moment he stepped forward. Right now, God is not demanding confidence. He is asking you to trust Him beyond fear, yield deeper than pride, and value surrender above ease. What separates you from the open passage is not divine quietness, but personal choice. The motion required may feel minimal, yet its consequence stretches into eternity. Certain moments never return, and this is one of them. Not every access point God provides remains available once ignored. Some openings are assigned to precise seasons, distinct purposes, and specific levels of readiness. When those seasons conclude, the opportunity does not always return in the same shape. Many assume divine compassion guarantees unlimited repeats. Yet Scripture reveals that while God is gracious, moments of divine invitation are holy and time-sensitive. When they are overlooked, the impact may not surface immediately, but it is never absent. Often, people realize an entrance has closed only when they reach for it and encounter resistance where freedom once existed. They question unanswered prayers, stalled progress, and fading joy, not realizing that silence does not always indicate absence. Sometimes it signals transition. What once required obedience now demands endurance. What could have been received freely must now be pursued through struggle, if recovery remains possible at all. This is why awareness in the present matters so deeply. Hesitation quietly turns open pathways into sealed ones without warning. The most perilous assumption is believing another identical chance will always appear. Though God can create new openings, they are not always the same ones. A calling postponed may re-emerge diminished. A relationship neglected may not return whole. A caution ignored may transform into a lesson learned through pain rather than grace. The tragedy is not that love ends, but that opportunity passes while love remained. Regret often rises not only from wrongdoing, but from stillness when action was possible. Scripture offers sobering reminders of this truth. Esau wept for a blessing he once treated lightly, and the unprepared virgins arrived to find access denied. These accounts are not meant to frighten, but to awaken understanding. They declare that timing matters to God. Faith is not belief alone, it is response in motion. When God opens an entrance, heaven pauses and waits. When that entrance closes, heaven advances without delay. At this very moment, you are standing in an hour that carries eternal significance. The access before you remains available, but it will not remain so indefinitely. God is not urging you from harshness, but from urgency. He sees what lies ahead if you remain still, the regret, the loss, the unanswered questions. That is why this message feels intense. Love cautions before it retreats. This is not meant to trap you in fear, but to anchor you in clarity. You are not without power, and the entrance has not yet been sealed. Choice still exists, but choice carries a deadline. What you decide now will shape what follows, because once the door closes, explanations will not unlock it again.